It is 3 a.m. The world outside your window is completely silent, wrapped in the quiet, restorative blanket of the dark. By all biological logic, your body should be paralyzed, your consciousness severed, and your mind wandering through surreal landscapes. Instead, you are intensely, agonizingly awake. You stare at the ceiling, feeling the crushing weight of exhaustion in your bones, yet your mind is racing at 1,000 miles per hour. You are trapped in the frustrating, lonely purgatory of insomnia. For decades, we viewed insomnia as a simple psychological frustration. But modern neuroimaging has uncovered a far more terrifying truth. Insomnia is not merely the absence of sleep. It is a violent, 24-hour state of chronic biological hyperarousal. Your brain is not failing to sleep. It is actively, aggressively fighting to keep you awake. Throughout your waking day, a chemical called adenosine steadily accumulates in your forebrain, acting as a biological hourglass. Simultaneously, your brain's master clock, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, tracks the setting sun and dictates that it is time to rest. When these align, a master switch is thrown. Deep within your hypothalamus, a cluster of neurons called the VLPO awakens. The VLPO acts as the brain's ultimate assassin of wakefulness, firing inhibitory neurotransmitters directly into the brainstem's arousal centers. Neuroscientists call this the flip-flop switch. The brain wants you fully awake to face the world, or fully asleep to recover. So, what happens in the brain of an insomniac? Why does this elegant switch fail to flip? The answer lies in an evolutionary safeguard: the DMH. Think of the DMH as the brain's ultimate survival calculator. If you are terrified, the ancient fear centers, specifically the amygdala, flood the DMH with signals of intense emotional distress. In response, the DMH makes a decision. Survival is more important than rest. It decisively overrides the sleep drive. It throws its weight against the VLPO, violently jamming the brain's flip-flop switch into the wake position. For our ancestors, this was a lifesaver, keeping them vigilant when a saber-toothed cat was prowling nearby. But today, your brain cannot distinguish between a prehistoric predator and modern psychological stressors like financial crises or deadlines. Primary insomnia is not just a nighttime problem. PT scans reveal chronic insomniacs are locked in a 24-hour state of metabolic hyperarousal. In a healthy sleeper, the prefrontal cortex naturally powers down. In an insomniac, these regions refuse to go dark. Because the brain cannot fully surrender, it is denied its most crucial biological process: synaptic homeostasis. Healthy, slow waves shrink these synapses, washing away metabolic ash. But the insomniac is trapped in an unending cycle of synaptic potentiation. The brain's circuitry is crowded with the noise of yesterday, leaving no room to process the reality of today. What hidden damage is occurring within the skull when the biological washing machine is never allowed to turn on?
You are lying in the dark, your eyes wide open, listening to the agonizingly slow ticking of the clock. To the outside observer, you are resting. You are not moving, you are not working, and you are not speaking. You might assume that simply lying still in the quiet hours of the night is providing your brain with some measure of relief. But from a biological standpoint, this is a devastating illusion. Because you are awake, your brain is actively suffocating in its own waste. To understand the physical damage of insomnia, we must observe the microscopic reality of a brain denied its most fundamental cleansing ritual. Throughout your waking day, Your brain is a theater of relentless, explosive energy. Every problem you solve requires your neurons to fire. Just as a campfire leaves behind ash, the intense metabolic activity of your waking brain leaves behind highly toxic chemical byproducts. In the rest of your body, waste is cleared by the lymphatic system, but the brain is an isolated, fortified fortress. It is sealed off from the body by the blood-brain barrier. Scientists were baffled. How does the brain prevent itself from being poisoned by its exhaust? The answer was revealed through advanced microscopy. A hidden plumbing network dubbed the glymphatic system. The brain pumps pristine cerebrospinal fluid through the dense tissue to flush toxic waste back into the circulatory system. But there is a catch. This hidden plumbing system is almost 10 times more active during sleep. It is like hosting a house party. You can either entertain your guests, or you can clean the house, but you cannot do both simultaneously. When a healthy sleeper falls into deep sleep, their brain cells actually shrink in size by a staggering 60%. It is like opening the floodgates of a dam. The cerebrospinal fluid rushes freely through, scrubbing away the toxic metabolic ash. But the insomniac's brain falls into a trap. This shrinking is controlled by a neurotransmitter, noradrenaline. Noradrenaline is the chemical of stress. In a normal brain, levels plummet at night, signaling it is safe to begin the wash cycle. But the insomniac is locked in chronic hyperarousal. Because your brain is bracing for an attack, your noradrenaline levels remain stubbornly high. As long as this chemical is present, brain cells refuse to shrink. They remain swollen, tightly packed, effectively sealing the floodgates shut. The consequences are terrifying. Toxic waste begins to rapidly pool and stagnate. One dangerous toxin is a protein called amyloid beta. This accumulation is the primary biological building block of Alzheimer's disease. Almost every neurodegenerative disease is associated with this failure. Every night you are held hostage by arousal. Your brain is denied the ability to take out the trash. The daytime brain fog and fatigue are the desperate cries of a brain that is literally choking on its own toxic tide. While the chemical ash piles up, every thought and worry is forcing your brain to physically grow, demanding space you simply do not have.
Every single moment you are awake, your brain is fundamentally altering its own physical structure. As you navigate the world, hold a conversation, or even just lie in the dark ruminating, the connections between your brain cells are actively firing. This relentless daytime process, known as synaptic potentiation, is the very foundation of human learning, memory, and adaptability. You are quite literally wiring your experiences into the architecture of your mind. But this comes at a staggering, unavoidable biological price. The cerebral cortex is the most metabolically expensive tissue in the human body. Strengthening a synapse demands significantly more fuel to function. In fact, nearly 80% of the cortex's massive energy budget is spent solely on supporting neuronal firing and postsynaptic activity. Furthermore, strengthened synapses do not just consume more energy, they physically grow in size. Terminal boutons and dendritic spines expand, demanding more physical room within the densely packed, strictly limited real estate of your skull. For a healthy sleeper, this weight is temporary. But for the insomniac, this constant strengthening becomes a biological nightmare. Imagine your brain as a sponge that is continuously absorbing water, but is never allowed to be squeezed dry. Because the insomniac's brain is locked in hyperarousal, the mind continues to race. It treats anxious thoughts as vital experiences. It actively wires these anxieties into your neural circuitry, further strengthening the synapses of fear and frustration. Without sleep, this process continues unchecked. Your neural circuits rapidly approach a state of absolute saturation, synaptic overload. The microscopic space becomes so tightly packed with overgrown connections that the signal-to-noise ratio in your mind severely plummets. Your brain becomes so crowded with the overlapping static of yesterday's worries that it becomes physically impossible to encode anything new. This is the source of the insomniac's agony. Brain fog and emotional instability are direct physical symptoms of metabolic overload. The circuits are quite literally bursting at the seams. Your brain's capacity to learn, adapt, and process the world has ground to a halt. To survive, the brain requires a global reset, a massive, coordinated pruning of its own overgrown circuitry. It requires the deep dark. But the insomniac's brain, hijacked by survival instincts, has locked the door to this vital restoration. Your mind is a crowded room. After a long waking day, your cerebral cortex, the wrinkled outermost layer of your brain, is pushed to its metabolic limits. As we discovered in the science of synaptic plasticity, every conversation and every piece of information today has forced the connections between your neurons to grow. The network is saturated. The signal is being drowned out by the noise of a billion anxious thoughts. To survive, the brain has evolved a reset. It is a process of brutal, elegant subtraction. But to execute this reset, the brain must surrender to the rolling depths of non-rapid eye movement sleep. If we placed EEG sensors across the scalp, the descent into deep sleep is unmistakable. The chaotic electrical chatter of waking life begins to smooth out. It is replaced by a massive, synchronized rhythm that sweeps across the entire cortical mantle. These are the slow oscillations pulsing at 0.1 to 4 Hz. During a slow wave, billions of brain cells engage in a perfectly choreographed binary dance. They alternate between two extreme states. First, the up state, a phase of massive, collective depolarization. But then comes the down state. Every single second, millions of neurons fall absolutely silent. This silence is the most productive period of the night. It acts as a biological sculptor, triggering a generalized downscaling of your synapses. Imagine every connection shedding weight, a crucial memory scaled from 150 to 120, a weaker, irrelevant detail scaled to 0 and erased entirely. The crucial memories survive, while the useless noise is pruned away. Deep sleep clears physical space and sharpens the signal-to-noise ratio of your mind. You wake up with a clean slate, a defragmented biological hard drive. But downscaling is only half of the miracle. The brain is simultaneously engaging in the most complex data transfer known to science, active systems consolidation. Experiences are initially held in the hippocampus. To make them permanent, they must be transferred to the vast networks of the cortex. During NREM, 3 distinct brain rhythms align in perfect harmony. Slow oscillations provide the tempo. Nested within are sleep spindles, explosive bursts of electrical activity at 10 to 15 Hz, originating from the thalamus. Finally, sharp wave ripples from the hippocampus vibrate at 250 Hz. The brain literally replays the events of the day at lightning speed. When the wave, spindle, and ripple perfectly align, a channel of communication bursts open. The memory is fired upward and written into the cortex. But now, we must return to the tragedy of the insomniac. You are lying in bed, staring into the dark, your mind racing. Your brain is flooded with wake-promoting chemicals, most notably noradrenaline. the chemical of arousal and fear. In the hyper-aroused brain, noradrenaline remains stubbornly high. Your neurons are forced to keep firing, denied the vital silence of the down state. Because slow waves cannot form, the nightly reset is aborted. The noise of yesterday is never erased, leaving your circuits bloated and exhausted. The triple coupling collapses. Memories are left stranded in a fragile temporary buffer, while anxieties are wired into your long-term circuitry. You have become a chemical hostage. To break free, we must understand how these neurochemicals are holding your mind captive in the dark.
You are lying perfectly still. The room is dark, the house is quiet, and your body is exhausted. Yet a silent, invisible war is raging inside your skull. You try to clear your mind, taking deep breaths to force yourself into a state of relaxation. But the harder you try, the more awake you feel. You are not failing because of a lack of discipline. You are failing because your mind has been taken hostage by a chaotic chemical storm. To understand why you are trapped, we must explore the master conductors of the brain, the neuromodulators, and witness the hijacking of your survival instincts. In a healthy, sleeping brain, the transition into the deep, restorative darkness of NREM sleep is governed by a precise chemical tide. One of the most critical conductors is a small bluish cluster of neurons located deep within the brainstem, known as the locus coeruleus. The locus coeruleus is the brain's primary factory for norepinephrine, the powerful chemical of arousal, stress, and focused attention. During the day, this chemical fuels your ability to react to the world. But for you to fall asleep, the locus coeruleus must stand down. In a normal brain, norepinephrine levels plummet, creating a highly permissive window where remaining levels oscillate at a rhythmic frequency of 12.02 Hertz. When norepinephrine temporarily rises, it triggers sleep spindles, bursts of electrical activity that lock new memories into the cortex. But in the hyper-aroused brain of an insomniac, this beautiful oscillation is utterly destroyed. Your brain's survival calculator has jammed the sleep switch because it believes you are under an existential threat. The locus coeruleus continues to pump a steady toxic stream of norepinephrine into your cortex. This prevents brain cells from shrinking, sealing the glymphatic system and trapping toxic waste inside your head. It also interferes with hippocampal cortical communication, the vital channel required to consolidate and save your daily memories is effectively blocked. But norepinephrine is not the only chemical holding you hostage. Another powerful neuromodulator enters the fray: dopamine. Dopamine is the chemical of salience and reward. In a healthy sleeper, it signals the transition into the dreaming state of REM sleep. However, in chronic insomnia, the dopamine system tags your intense emotional panic about not sleeping as a highly salient life-or-death event. The dopamine actively reinforces the neural circuits of your own anxiety, wiring the fear of the bed permanently into your brain's architecture. Your bed is no longer a sanctuary of rest. From a neurochemical standpoint, it has become a theater of threat. Simultaneously, other modulators like serotonin and acetylcholine are thrown completely out of balance. You are awake because your brain is marinating in a waking chemical cocktail. The locus coeruleus is ringing an invisible alarm bell. Under this chemical siege, the brain cannot perform its most essential nightly task, the physical transfer and preservation of your life's experiences. Tomorrow, you will not just be tired. You will be walking through the world with a fragmented mind and unsaved data. Fragile memories will be constantly slipping through your fingers, lost to the chemical storm of the night before. As you endure another sleepless night, held hostage by a chemical storm of your own brain's making, you are losing much more than just your energy. You are losing the very fabric of your past. For the chronic insomniac, the most terrifying symptom is not the physical exhaustion. It is the terrifying, creeping sensation that your mind is slipping through your fingers. You forget conversations you had just hours ago. You lose your train of thought mid-sentence, and the days blur together into an indistinct, hazy fog. Modern neuroscience reveals a far more mechanical, devastating truth. You are not forgetting because you aren't paying attention. You are forgetting because your brain has been physically stripped of its ability to press save. Every day, your brain is under constant siege by a relentless torrent of new sensory information and fleeting experiences. These fragile memories are initially encoded in the hippocampus, an ancient seahorse-shaped structure resting deep within the medial temporal lobe. But the hippocampus is merely a temporary biological holding buffer, possessing a strictly limited storage capacity. Its connections are highly plastic, making these new memories fragile and susceptible to being overwritten by the ongoing demands of your waking life. If your memories were to remain solely in this temporary vault, your identity would constantly dissolve, and long-term learning would be impossible. To transform these short-term impressions into permanent memories, active systems consolidation. The brain requires absolute disconnection from the external environment. It requires the sanctuary of deep sleep. During this process, memory traces in the hippocampus are painstakingly transferred to the cerebral cortex. In a healthy sleeper, this data transfer is a violently active, synchronized electrical symphony. As the brain descends into NREM sleep, it utilizes three oscillations. First, the massive, slow oscillations pulse across the cerebral cortex at 0.1 to 4 hertz, acting as the grand conductors of the sleeping brain. Nested within these slow waves are sleep spindles, transient, explosive bursts of electrical activity originating from the thalamus. The true magic occurs with the sharp wave ripple, high-frequency vibrations pulsing at 150 to 250 hertz, deep within the hippocampus. During these ripples, the precise neural representations of your waking experiences are literally replayed at lightning speed. When the cortex, thalamus,
and hippocampus align in perfect temporal coupling, a channel of communication is forced open and memories are fired upward. This is the miracle of memory consolidation. But for the insomniac, this beautiful triple coupling is violently shattered. Your brain's survival calculator has jammed the sleep switch open, flooding your cortex with wake-promoting chemicals like noradrenaline. As a result, slow oscillations cannot form properly, and the timing required to synchronize the cortex, thalamus, and hippocampus completely collapses. The ripples may still fire in your hippocampus, trying to upload data, but there is no slow wave to catch them and no spindle to carry them. By sunrise, the temporary buffer is full. As new waking experiences flood in, the unsaved files of yesterday are ruthlessly overwritten. This is why the insomniac's mind feels so broken. You are walking through the world with a fragmented biological hard drive, but the failure to save facts is only the beginning. Because memory is about emotion. When sleep breaks down, the emotional centers are left unhinged. There is a specific, agonizing sensation that every chronic insomniac knows all too well. After a night of fragmented, elusive sleep, you do not just wake up feeling physically tired. You wake up feeling emotionally raw. You feel like a live wire. A minor inconvenience, a spilled cup of coffee, a delayed email, or a misplaced set of keys suddenly provokes a surge of intense, disproportionate anger or brings you to the verge of tears. The world feels overwhelmingly abrasive. For years, we dismissed this emotional fragility as a mere byproduct of exhaustion. We told ourselves that we were just cranky from sleep deprivation. But modern neurobiology reveals a far more mechanical, devastating reality. You are not just irritable. You are suffering from a catastrophic failure. To understand why a sleepless mind becomes an emotional powder keg, we must look at the final stage of sleep, rapid eye movement, or REM. If deep sleep is the hard drive where facts are saved, REM sleep is the emotional master synthesizer. As you enter REM, a rhythmic hum takes over the brain, particularly in the hippocampus. The theta wave, oscillating at 5 to 8 hertz. These theta waves facilitate psychological alchemy, driving cognitive flexibility, associative learning, and the processing of our deepest emotional memories. Functional MRI scans during this REM state show a fascinating landscape. The limbic system, the emotional heartland, goes into absolute overdrive. The amygdala, responsible for fear and anxiety, becomes hyperactive. Simultaneously, the prefrontal cortex, the center for logic, goes completely offline. In this uninhibited state, the brain pulls up the most emotionally charged and even traumatic memories of your waking day to process them. But why would the brain intentionally reactivate our most painful anxieties and fears while we are paralyzed in sleep? According to scientists, REM sleep serves as overnight therapy. The secret lies in a miraculous neurochemical trick. While the amygdala relives anxieties, it does so in a brain almost entirely devoid of noradrenaline, the brain's primary stress-related neurotransmitter. REM sleep allows the brain to re-examine distressing memories in a neurochemical environment that is completely safe and stress-free. In effect, the dreaming brain actively strips the visceral, painful emotional charge away from the memory itself. You retain the informational content. You remember what happened. But the sharp, painful edge is softened and neutralized. This nightly recalibration is why a healthy sleeper can wake up feeling calmer, with a renewed, softened perspective. Furthermore, the brain engages in synaptic refinement. It prunes redundant connections, preventing your neural networks from becoming overloaded. But for the insomniac, this beautiful, healing machinery is violently hijacked. The insomniac's brain is locked in biological hyperarousal. Your survival calculator, the dorsomedial hypothalamus, has jammed your sleep switch to wake. Because your brain believes you are under threat, it refuses to shut off the locus coeruleus, the factory that pumps out noradrenaline. Even if you slip into fragmented REM sleep, your brain is marinated in a toxic, waking chemical cocktail. Noradrenaline never drops to zero. When your amygdala attempts to process the fears of your day, it does so with the full physiological stress response intact. Because your amygdala was denied its reset, it remains hyperreactive, operating at a heightened state of alarm. At the same time, because your prefrontal cortex is metabolically exhausted, it can no longer exert logical control over your emotions. The world is no longer just a place to exist. To your sleep-deprived brain, the world is a landscape of constant threat. You are trapped in an emotional overdrive, reacting to the shadows of yesterday because your brain was forbidden from leaving them in the dark. But this internal war is not just a battle of chemicals. It is a fundamental rebellion against the very rotation of the earth. To understand why you feel so profoundly out of sync, we must look at the master clock ticking deep inside your skull. It is now 4 a.m. As you lie awake in the suffocating silence of the night, you are forced to confront a maddening paradox. Your eyes are burning, Your muscles are heavy with exhaustion, and you've been awake for nearly 20 hours. By every logical measure of human biology, you should be completely unconscious. Yet, you are trapped in a state of hypervigilance. To understand why, we must zoom out from the microscopic synapses and look at the grand forces that govern the timing of your life. We must explore the two-process model of sleep and witness what happens when the ancient clockwork of your brain rebels against the earth. In a healthy human, the descent into sleep is dictated by a flawless alignment of two massive biological forces. The first is process S, the homeostatic sleep drive. Throughout your day, as neurons fire, they consume energy, breaking down ATP into adenosine. As hours pass, adenosine steadily accumulates in your brain, acting as a relentless biological hourglass. It dampens your wake-promoting centers while priming the sleep-inducing ventrolateral preoptic nucleus, or VLPO. This is sleep pressure. The longer you stay awake, the heavier this invisible chemical weight becomes, creating an unbearable physical need to rest. But sleep pressure alone does not dictate sleep. It is partnered with process C, your circadian rhythm. Deep within your hypothalamus lies the master clock, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN. It keeps time for every cell. It is synchronized by specialized cells in your retina that track the fading light of the sun. When the weight of adenosine aligns with the midnight ticking of the SCN, the sleep switch is effortlessly thrown. But for the insomniac, this model is broken. You have the sleep pressure and your clock knows it's night. So why are you awake? The answer lies in adaptability. If a predator was stalking a prehistoric human at midnight, falling asleep would mean certain death. Therefore, the brain relies on a third mechanism, the allostatic regulation of sleep. The SCN routes signals to the true master integrator of the hypothalamus, the dorsomedial nucleus, or DMH, the brain's survival calculator. The DMH weighs exhaustion against emotional distress signals from the limbic system, including the amygdala. As you lie in bed dreading tomorrow's exhaustion, your amygdala detects a psychological threat and floods the DMH with panic. The DMH concludes, survival is more important than rest. It executes a complete allostatic override, defying the biological clock. It drives the arousal systems, maintaining a steady flood of noradrenaline and histamine into your cortex. Your brain cannot distinguish between a stalking predator and the psychological torture of an impending deadline. You are trapped in a neurochemical hostage situation, desperate for sleep, yet chemically wired for war. But the brain cannot sustain this forever. As sleeplessness accumulates, a terrifying neurological fracturing begins to occur. If the brain is not allowed to sleep, it will force itself to sleep in pieces right while you're walking, talking, and driving. You are sitting at your desk, or perhaps driving down a familiar stretch of highway. Your eyes are open, your hands are on the wheel, and you are physically performing the actions of a waking human being. But internally, you feel a terrifying sensation of slipping. You read the same sentence 5 times without comprehending a single word, or you suddenly realize you have no memory of the last 3 miles. For the chronic insomniac, the daytime hours are a minefield of cognitive lapses and profound brain fog. We often dismiss this as simply being tired or lacking focus. But advanced neurobiology reveals a far more mechanical and terrifying reality. Your brain is not just tired, it is actively fracturing. Because you have denied your mind the global rest it desperately needs, it has begun to force itself to sleep in pieces. For decades, science viewed sleep and wakefulness as monolithic, mutually exclusive states. You were either entirely awake or entirely asleep. But high-density EEG recordings have shattered this illusion, revealing that the brain states of consciousness are not always global. Sleep possesses highly local, asynchronous features. The brain does not always sleep all at once. If you push a specific neural circuit to its metabolic limits, for example, the parietal cortex, that region will experience localized sleep pressure. In the hyper-aroused brain of an insomniac, this local sleep pressure builds to an unbearable extreme. The allostatic override has jammed the master switch into the wake position, flooding the cortex with noradrenaline. But at the microscopic level, the homeostatic sleep drive cannot be ignored. Your synapses are severely overloaded. Eventually, the desperate cellular need for recovery overrides the global waking signal. What happens next is local sleep. Deep within your awake brain, isolated islands of neurons suddenly rebel and enter a hyperpolarized down state. These local slow waves begin to pop up, bubbling to the surface like bubbles in boiling water. Even though your eyes are open, localized patches of your cerebral cortex are literally falling asleep. When these off periods strike your motor cortex, you clumsily drop your keys or stumble. When they strike your prefrontal cortex, your working memory collapses and you forget what you were about to say. When these local sleep waves synchronize, they culminate in the terrifying phenomenon of a microsleep. For a few seconds, the causal links between your brain regions break apart. Your consciousness experiences a profound lapse. You do not even realize your mind went offline because the circuits required to monitor awareness were the ones that fell asleep. You have become a divided brain. You are caught in a treacherous twilight zone where boundaries have collapsed. The clockwork rebellion has forced your mind to operate as a fragmented mosaic, partially awake, partially asleep. But this blurring of boundaries is not just a daytime hazard. What happens when the protective walls of the dream world break down at night? What happens when the dream becomes a theater of terror?
For the chronic insomniac, falling asleep is only half the battle. When the exhausted mind finally crosses the threshold into the dark, it does not always find a sanctuary of rest. Instead, the fragmented sleep of a hyper-aroused brain often plunges the dreamer into a theater of psychological terror. You wake up with your heart pounding against your ribs, drenched in sweat, gasping for air as the fading images of a nightmare dissolve into the shadows of your bedroom. You escape the waking anxiety, only to be ambushed by your own mind in your sleep. To understand why your brain turns its most creative state into a weapon against you, we must examine the ancient evolutionary purpose of our dreams and witness what happens when the brain's built-in survival simulator is pushed to the point of catastrophic overload. From an evolutionary standpoint, the vivid, narrative-driven dreams of rapid eye movement, or REM sleep, are not mere nocturnal entertainment. According to the threat simulation theory proposed by philosopher Antti Revonsuo, the primary ancestral purpose of dreaming was to serve as a high-fidelity virtual reality simulator for human survival. Throughout much of our evolutionary history, the waking world was fraught with constant physical peril. By simulating these dangers, being chased by a predator, falling from a great height, or engaging in brutal physical combat, our early human ancestors rehearsed their fight-or-flight instincts in the safe, paralyzed environment of a dream. They could hone their defensive strategies and sharpen their reflexes without any real-world risk. This evolutionary hardwiring neatly explains why negative emotions and threatening scenarios are universally common in human dreams. Today, your brain does not distinguish between prehistoric physical threats and modern psychological ones. We are no longer rehearsing escapes from saber-toothed cats. Instead, our brains simulate the modern survival landscape, failing an exam, showing up unprepared for a presentation, or being publicly humiliated. The brain simply runs the simulation, generating anxiety dreams to keep your coping mechanisms primed and ready for the waking world. In a healthy sleeper, this simulation is carefully controlled by a miraculous neurochemical trick. During REM sleep, the amygdala, the brain's emotional epicenter, blazes with activity, processing these simulated fears. However, it does so in a brain that is almost entirely devoid of noradrenaline, the primary neurotransmitter responsible for stress and panic. This allows the healthy brain to safely experience and neutralize frightening scenarios, stripping the painful emotional charge away from the memory. But the insomniac's brain is fundamentally broken. Because you are suffering from chronic biological hyperarousal, Your locus coeruleus refuses to shut down, maintaining a steady toxic stream of noradrenaline throughout the night. When your brain enters the threat simulator of REM sleep, the safety protocols are completely offline. The amygdala processes the frightening simulation with the full, intense physiological stress response completely intact. This is the mechanical anatomy of a nightmare. A true nightmare represents a massive overload of the dreaming brain's emotional regulation function. Instead of safely stripping the emotion from an anxiety-inducing memory, the system becomes overwhelmed by the stress chemicals, and the amygdala's raw fear response entirely dominates the experience, culminating in an abrupt, terrifying awakening. This same devastating neurochemical failure is observed in patients with post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, who suffer from chronic nightmares where they are forced to re-experience trauma without the ability to properly neutralize it. Yet, the horrors of the night are not limited to REM sleep. Sometimes, the brain generates a terror so profound that it bypasses the dream entirely. This phenomenon is known as a night terror. Unlike nightmares, night terrors are not dreams in the conventional sense. They are a disorder of arousal erupting from the deepest stages of NREM, or slow-wave sleep. A person experiencing a night terror may suddenly sit bolt upright, scream, and appear absolutely terrified, yet they are completely unresponsive to their surroundings. Crucially, the narrative-generating machinery of REM sleep is not active here. A night terror is a raw, unadulterated, physiological fear response erupting from the deepest stage of sleep, leaving the victim with a racing heart, but little to no recall of any actual dream content. But perhaps the most profound malfunction occurs when the physical boundary between the dream and reality collapses entirely. Normally, the brainstem actively paralyzes your motor neurons during REM sleep, a state called REM atonia, preventing you from physically acting out your dreams. But in a condition known as REM sleep behavior disorder, or RBD, this paralysis completely fails. Patients physically act out their dreams, thrashing, kicking, and violently fighting invisible foes in their beds. Medical science now recognizes this not just as a sleep disturbance, but as a chilling diagnostic window into the physical future of the brain. The malfunctioning of this specific brainstem circuitry is a powerful early warning sign, predicting the onset of severe neurodegenerative conditions like Parkinson's disease or Lewy body dementia a decade or two before any waking motor symptoms appear. Your mind is a tireless forge, but chronic stress and insomnia have turned that forge into a battlefield. You are trapped in a vicious, exhausting loop. Your daytime anxieties keep your survival switch jammed open, flooding your brain with stress chemicals that destroy the architecture of your sleep, which in turn weaponizes your dreams, making you even more terrified to close your eyes the next night. The clockwork is broken. The memory systems are shattered. The threat simulator is stuck in overdrive. Is there any way to escape this biological hostage situation? Can the hyper-aroused brain ever be taught to surrender to the dark once more? Documentary script: Why Your Brain Won't Let You Sleep. The Science of Insomnia. Part 11. Reclaiming the Dark and the Path to Rest. We have journeyed through the fractured landscape of the sleepless mind. We have witnessed the toxic tide rising in the brain's tissues, the crushing weight of synaptic overload, the shattering of memory, and the terrifying rebellion of the biological clock. To the chronic insomniac, this internal war feels like a permanent neurological failure. You feel as though your brain has fundamentally forgotten how to sleep. But modern neuroscience offers a profound message of hope. Your brain is not broken. It is merely trapped in a highly successful, ancient survival mechanism, and the very neuroplasticity that wired your mind for waking panic can be harnessed to guide you back into the dark. The core of your insomnia is the allostatic override. Your dorsomedial hypothalamus, your survival calculator, is detecting the psychological stress of modern life and jamming the flip-flop switch open. It is forcing your locus coeruleus to pump noradrenaline, overriding the natural homeostatic accumulation of adenosine and the ticking of your circadian clock. For years, medical science attempted to solve this by blunt force. We utilize sedative hypnotic drugs like benzodiazepines, which artificially enhance the inhibitory power of GABA receptors to chemically suppress the central nervous system. While these medications can force unconsciousness, they represent a generalized suppression rather than mimicking the precise, elegant architecture of natural sleep. They can interfere with the massive, synchronized, slow waves necessary for synaptic downscaling, leaving you unconscious, but biologically unrestored. To truly reclaim the dark, you must address the root of the override. You must convince your survival calculator that the environment is safe. This is not achieved through willpower, but through behavioral neuroplasticity. The most effective, scientifically validated treatment for chronic insomnia is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, or CBTI. At its core, CBTI is a structured method of rewiring the brain's associations. As we learned, your dopamine and noradrenaline systems have mistakenly tagged your bed as a theater of threat. By strictly controlling your sleep environment, using the bed only for sleep, and leaving the room the moment anxiety spikes, you actively dismantle this toxic neural pathway. You are starving the anxiety circuits of the reinforcement they need to survive. Simultaneously, through the grueling process of sleep restriction therapy, you temporarily limit your time in bed. This forces a massive artificial accumulation of adenosine in your basal forebrain. You build the homeostatic sleep pressure to an unbearable extreme, creating a biological tidal wave so powerful that it eventually crashes over the survival calculator's override. When that moment finally arrives, the miracle of natural sleep returns. The ventrolateral preoptic nucleus, or VLPO, awakens and fires its inhibitory transmitters, GABA and galanin, directly into the arousal centers. The locus coeruleus stands down, noradrenaline plummets to a whisper. Freed from the chemical of fear, your brain cells undergo their nightly physical transformation, shrinking by up to 60%. The floodgates open, and the glymphatic system pumps cerebrospinal fluid through the tissues, washing the toxic metabolic ash of your waking anxieties back into the circulatory system. Across the vast mantle of your cerebral cortex, the frantic, jagged electrical static of insomnia smooths out, replaced by the massive, synchronized, rolling rhythm of slow-wave sleep. With each sweeping, slow oscillation, your overgrown, exhausted synapses are systematically downscaled. The chaotic noise of your daily stress is pruned away, while the critical, robust memory traces are preserved and stabilized by the delicate, synchronous dance of cortical slow oscillations, thalamic spindles, and hippocampal sharp-wave ripples. Your biological hard drive is finally defragmented. The metabolic overload recedes, and the energetic capacity to learn, adapt, and feel joy is restored. Sleep is not a sign of weakness. It is not an evolutionary mistake, nor is it a passive surrender to a void. It is the most active, metabolically complex, and vital biological process your brain will ever undertake. It is the mandatory price we pay for the miracle of waking neuroplasticity. We do not go to sleep to escape reality. We descend into the midnight labyrinth to build, repair, and understand it. For those trapped in the waking nightmare of insomnia, know that the machinery of rest is still intact inside your skull. The clockwork can be repaired. The switch can be flipped by understanding the profound science of your own mind. You can disarm the survival alarms, silence the chemical storm, and finally, grant your brain the permission it desperately needs to surrender once more to the restorative power of the dark.